Hello. So we're going to look at languages and algorithms and machines, and they're all very well related together. You have to have a machine to run a language on, and in order to do something useful with an algorithm, you need a language. So the three are very, very closely linked. And it's worth just reflecting how many languages you might know. I'm not talking about spoken languages, I'm talking about programming languages. And you think you probably know Python. There are probably other languages that you know without realizing it. So if you use an Excel spreadsheet, then inside the Excel spreadsheet there is a little language that does the calculations and the formulas and other bits and pieces inside the cells of the spreadsheet. And there are other things that you do that you don't realize that they are in some way programming languages. And there's lots and lots and lots of languages out there, hundreds and hundreds. And there's even more little languages. And what I mean by a little language is a tiny language that's focused on a particular domain. So it does one thing and does one thing very well. So Excel, for example, has a language in it. It's quite a big language actually. But its main domain is doing calculations on values in cells in a spreadsheet. And what you will find as you learn more and more languages is that they all have very, very different ways of thinking about problems, maybe, but they all have a lot in common. So if you think about a common programming language, then you've got sequence, selection, iteration, functions. There's lots of variables, input and output. There's lots of common things that you'll find in each of those languages. So what I wanted to do today was to show you how you can go about learning a new language if you've learned a couple of languages before. And the thing to do is look at the similarities and say, oh, well, that's a bit different, but it's very similar to Python because it's got loops and it's got conditions and it's got input and output in it and those sorts of things. So I've got particular interest in little languages. I've done a lot of things over the years where I've looked at a problem and realised that there's a little language there to be written, and that little language is a programming language, a very, very tiny programming language with some very small dictionary of words that you can type into the language. It does one thing very well. So typical examples of little languages are Excel formulas. Also, if you used some of the various powerful search engines in program editors, they will often have a regular expression engine where you can type in a series of obscure characters and it does some very complex match of text in that document. And although these little languages are domain limited, they're still very, very useful. So one of the things I do quite a lot of in my programs is string editing. So a text string has all sorts of characters in it, and I want to do something useful on that string of characters. And I'm quite interested in writing computer languages, and I'm quite interested in languages that are small and quite quick to learn, but very, very compact, but very, very expressive. So you can do quite a lot of just a few small building blocks, and they can be quite powerful. So today I'm going to introduce you to a little language that I have written. It took me about a day to write. The core of it is about 100 lines of Python code, and it's called stredit or string edit. And what it does is it allows you to edit strings of text. And it basically it's a little bit like a Turing machine actually. It has a program tape and a data tape. So it has a string that represents the program and a string that represents the data. And what it will do is it will read instructions from that program and do operations on the data. So like any normal programming language, it has sequence, it has selection, it has iterations, and it has a concept of a subprogram. So you can decompose a bigger problem into smaller problems, get those smaller problems working first, and then stick them all together to make a bigger problem. Now there's four key concepts in this language, and what we're going to do today is we're going to learn this language. In a lesson we're going to learn the language and we're going to use it and experiment with it and write some little programs. And in doing that, what I want you to do is to think about perhaps your Python programming, and what is similar in the concepts between Python and stredit, and what is different. And what you'll notice is that there are various similarities and differences. So the 4 key concepts that you should be aware of, and we'll be exploring these a bit further later on. Number 1 is movement. So there's a cursor, and the cursor points into the data tape or the data string, and you can move that cursor backwards and forwards. And basically everything you do happens at the cursor. The second concept is change. So you can make a change to the character that is pointed to by the cursor. You do things like change its case, or change it to a particular letter or number, or delete it, or insert a space, but everything happens at the cursor, and you can change things. The third concept is inspection. So you can inspect the character and then make some decision based on that. So this is a bit like selection in a normal language. So you can say, if this character matches this condition, then do something. And then the fourth concept in this little language is subproblems. So you can write some commands in the language and group those together, and then you can use those as a group. So 1 is movement, 2 is change, 3 is inspection or selection, and 4 is subproblems. And the best way to illustrate those is to give you a demonstration of this working. So let's have a look at stredit. And to make this easy for you to perhaps use on Chromebooks or whatever, I've managed to get it to work in Trinket. So this is what it looks like. There's a Trinket share that you can use for this. And I think the first thing I'm going to do is make that window a bit bigger so I can see what I'm doing. So there's a Python module called stredit, which is all the code, and then I've written a little main program that just gives you some useful entry points into it. Let's just get this window over here so you can still see me. There somewhere. I'm probably going to disappear whenever I press the button, aren't I? Let's move that over there a bit. There I am. Still see me and see the screen. Okay, so the first thing that I provided is some very simple online help that describes the key concepts, which we already described, 4 types of commands, and the other commands that you can try. So if I comment that one out, and if I select the examples and press the run button, then you'll find there's a whole load of examples, and we'll go through some of those in a minute. Let's comment that one out. If you want to know what all the commands are, let's uncomment that and press the run button. There's a list of all the commands. There's a feature called char sets or character sets, so you can group various similar characters together. So that's what that is. But the most important one is run. This gives you a little interactive shell. So the first thing it asks for is the program. This is the program tape. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a program that uppercases every single character in the string. And this is going to demonstrate 2 or 3 of the core concepts. So the first concept is a loop. If you want to loop something, you put a star. And then there's various letters and symbols that do things, which you can look up in the commands. And one of the commands is if you use what's called a caret or top hat, that basically converts the current character, the current cursor, into uppercase. It's like a little arrow that points up. If you want to convert it to lowercase, you use a lowercase v, so it's like a little arrow that points down. Now that's a loop, that's an iteration command, followed by a change command, which converts to uppercase. I'm now going to show you a move command, and a move command is you want to move the cursor to the right. And that's now a complete program. So it will say loop, convert to uppercase, move the cursor to the right, and it will go back to the loop again. And it will keep looping, it'll keep running the program until it gets to the end of the data, and when it hits the end of the data it will stop the program. So I'll press enter. So it's gone wrong. Loop, turn right. Okay, the data, so let's give it hello world, press enter or return, and you see what it's done is it's uppercased it. And it also tells you where the cursor is. So you see the cursor's left at the end. I can give it another piece of data and it will run the same program. If I enter a blank line, it goes back and asks me for another program. So let's try another program. And what this program is going to do, is even simpler program, is it's going to move the cursor 3 spaces to the right. Let's put some data in. And you see it's moved the cursor 3 spaces to the right. Let's press enter because I don't want any more data. Let's do one more little example. And so let's say I want to move it 7 spaces to the right. So I could put in the right, the greater than symbol, like a right arrow 7 times. But we're programmers, we're lazy. So if I say 7, so I put a number followed by a command. So if I prefix any command with a number, it will run that command that number of times. Trinket is playing up. Let's try again. 7 to the right. Data. Hello world. And you see it's moved the cursor 7 spaces to the right. And you might be asking, what happens if your string isn't 7 characters long? Well, as soon as it hits the end of the string, it assumes you've fallen off the end of the universe and it stops the program. Press enter on that, back to the program, press enter, and it finishes. Okay, so what I want you to do now is load this up in Trinket. Your teacher will give you the correct web address, because there might actually be a different web address if I fix some bugs in it. And you should see this. Make the window a bit bigger so you can see everything that's going on, and look at a couple of examples. There's a worksheet with some examples on it. If you're a bit stuck, you can ask it to tell you what the commands and the character sets are. But basically run is the important command. If you uncomment just run and then press the run button here, it will run a program. You can enter the program and enter the data. Okay, so work on the first worksheet and we'll see you back in a minute.